If everyone could just take a moment and silence their cell phones. And please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have 3 proclamations for this evening. The first is a resolution in memory of the Reverend Billy Graham, and I have here that we might have Glenn Wilcox here and possibly Will Graham. Is anybody here? Yes? Oh, thank you.
Come on up here.
I'll read the proclamation. A resolution in memory of Reverend Billy Graham. Whereas on behalf of the City of Asheville, we extend our sincere condolences over the passing of Reverend Billy Graham. And whereas Reverend Billy Graham was a charismatic North Carolina pastor who preached to more than 200 million people in 185 countries, counseled presidents, and led mass religious rallies that featured professional musicians and huge choirs in venues ranging from a circus tent in Los Angeles to Yankee Stadium in New York. And whereas Reverend Billy Graham held one of his famous religious rallies here in Asheville, and whereas Reverend Billy Graham served as a counselor or minister to a dozen U.S. presidents and had a close fellowship with Queen Elizabeth II and the royal family, and whereas the Reverend Billy Graham died on February 21st, 2018, now therefore be it resolved by the City Council in the City of Asheville that the City of Asheville extend our sincere sympathies to his families and supporters upon the passing of Reverend Billy Graham. Thank you. Thank you for coming down. If you want to make a couple comments.
Well, to the City of Asheville, and to the western part of North Carolina, thank you for letting my family live here. This is home. And we're so grateful to have this Asheville community that looked after my grandparents. As a matter of fact, you guys hid them here so they could rest and live here in peace, and we're so grateful for that. So I just want, on behalf of my family, just say thank you for loving my family, and we greatly appreciate it. Thank you for this wonderful proclamation, and I'll take your condolences to the rest of my family. Thank you so much.
And Glenn, did you want to add anything?
Thank you very much for presenting it as a wonderful thing the city is doing, and I appreciate your leadership and the city council's leadership, and I'm grateful for the friendship I had with Billy Graham for over 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mia. But it's not what the formal piece of paper said it is. Our next proclamation is a proclamation proclaiming March 10th, 2018 as ZELDA FITZGERALD Day, and we have Jim McKenzie. And if you have anybody else, no. Our Vice Mayor is going to come down and present the proclamation.
Whereas ZELDA FITZGERALD still stands today as an icon for the jazz age, for creativity, and especially for women seeking a world that treats them equally. And whereas ZELDA was the first flapper of the Roaring '20s, yet she found her own voice through dance, writing, and the visual arts, while living in the shadow of her notable husband. And whereas ZELDA lived in Asheville frequently for the final dozen years of her life, diagnosed as schizophrenic, enduring primitive cures, the loss of her husband, and financial hardships. And whereas ZELDA perished in a controversial fire at Asheville's Highland Hospital on March 10, 1948, while locked in her room. And whereas ZELDA FITZGERALD Day in Asheville is the only local celebration honoring this amazing woman, with events all throughout the city during the week of March 9th through the 16th, beginning with an examination of ZELDA's art, and also a painting workshop at the Asheville Art Museum, an exploration of emotions through music at Base Camp AVL, an exhibit of art created by people served by Aurora Studios, a video game contest at Orbit DVD, a book club discussion, readings, and literary karaoke at Malacroft's Bookstore and Cafe, and a discussion of practices at Highland Hospital led by Dr. Daniel Johnson, MD, and a Roaring 20s cocktail party and costume contest at the Pillar Rooftop Bar. Now therefore, I, Esther Mannheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby proclaim March 10, 2018 as ZELDA FITZGERALD Day in Asheville and encourage all citizens to take part in celebrating her life.
Hello. Mayor, members of council, my name is Jim McKenzie. I just want to thank you for your continued support and recognition of ZELDA FITZGERALD Day here. I believe personally it is a very worthwhile event. We want to continue to grow the event and use ZELDA more as a jumping off point or a conversation starter rather than the end of its meaning, because she was involved with so many things. I think she was, her meaning is she had a lot more meaning than just her suffering and death here in Asheville. She was a painter and a dancer and a writer and a provocateur. So I think Asheville would really just adore her if she were still around. So I just want to invite everyone to participate in this year and in hopefully in future ZELDA days. Thanks for having me tonight.
Okay, and our last proclamation of the day is the proclamation proclaiming March 19th through 25th, 2018 as Asheville Climate Week. And I've got Megan Robinson here, and Councilmember Julie Mayfield will present the proclamation.
Kathy, do you want to come up? All right. City of Asheville proclamation. Whereas Asheville, North Carolina is home to the Collider, a global center for climate entrepreneurship and innovation focused on creating breakthrough solutions that enable humanity to adapt and thrive in a changing climate. And whereas Asheville, North Carolina is also home to the NOAA National Centers for Environmental Information that stewards and provides public access to more than 30, new word for me folks, petabytes of comprehensive climate, coastal, oceanic, and geophysical data. And whereas scientists, entrepreneurs, engineers, and environmentalists began forming small businesses and consultancies in Asheville to develop innovative climate solutions. And whereas students and young professionals from Western North Carolina and across the United States come together to accept the challenge of becoming the next generation of climate leaders. And whereas the entire Asheville community, from breweries to bakeries, from art galleries to boutique shops, from restaurants to nonprofits, unite to be an exemplary community that understands making an impact on the climate starts with small daily decisions. Now therefore, I, Esther E. Mannheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, do hereby proclaim March 19th through 25th, 2018 as Asheville Climate Week in the City of Asheville, and call upon all citizens to celebrate and promote the importance of the innovative work being done to develop solutions to climate change in the land of the sky and to the resilience of humanity worldwide. Do you want to tell us about what's happening that week?
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being so supportive of the Collider from the day it opened through the present, and we expect to be around for many years, so thank you for your continued support. Asheville Climate Week is happening in just 3 short weeks. We have 3 components in order to engage all of Western North Carolina and our community, not just from the businesses, but the students and the general public. We have the Business of Climate Forum, which has industry leaders, not just from Hewlett-Packard and IBM, but from right down the street in the Collider. So people are coming here from all around the world to listen to the innovative ideas that are being developed right here in downtown Asheville. We also have the Summit for Emerging Climate Leaders, which started out having 20 to 30 students and now has nearly 150 students, rising college freshmen, so they're currently seniors, and Western North Carolina students, both undergrad and grad students, coming to learn about climate careers and opportunities to pitch their own business idea. And lastly, which I thank all of you for your support on, is the Climate City experience. So Asheville's not just Beer City, but we're also Climate City. Like, we know we have 30 petabytes of data sitting right downtown. Well, how can we take advantage of that and create new businesses, new knowledge jobs, and new career paths for people living here in Western North Carolina, and save the world at the same time? So I encourage all of you to participate in some way, shape, or form, and look forward to this growing in years to come. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our proclamations. Now, our consent agenda. Are there any questions, comments, or a motion regarding the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone wishing to comment on the motion to approve the consent agenda? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I would just like to note that the Southern Conference Basketball Tournament starts this weekend, apparently with Jam Fest, which is on our consent agenda. But that's always an exciting time for us here in the city of Asheville at the U.S. Cellular Center. Maggie's especially excited. Are you working it, Maggie?
Oh, yes.
Maggie's working it. So if you want to watch some basketball. Okay, we have a number of items under presentations and reports. However, the last three of those items are reports only, meaning that we will not hear the report at council, but if you want to view it, you can look at the link on our website on the electronic agenda. So the first item is the Legislative Study Committee presentation by Representative Chuck McGRADY. We are joined here by the Henderson County State Representative, Chuck McGRADY, who's here to talk to us about his Legislative Study Committee and more. Welcome, Representative McGRADY.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. I'm joined actually by one of my House colleagues, at least one, Representative Turner. I really thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. I wanted to talk specifically about the Legislative Study Committee that I chair, the Joint Committee to Study Rates and Transfers from Public Enterprises. The reason I felt the need for public discussion was that my chairing this committee was argued as a reason to turn down Henderson County's application to join MSD. In fact, even after my appearance before Buncombe County and Henderson County Commissions and Henderson City Council, one activist says that my statements and actions suggest I'm moving towards another attempt to seize or regionalize water and possibly Hendersonville's as well. I would tell you that type of rhetoric thwarts regional cooperation on a range of issues from transportation to affordable housing to water to sewer. And so rather than depend on media or third-party reports on what the committee was about, I wanted to talk directly to you and other local officials. I'm trying to model different behavior, and not always done by legislators, but it is my style. Most, with the exception actually of the mayor, I guess, when I was a local official, there were other members sitting here. 7 years ago, I was a county commissioner, and sometime before that, I was a village councilman. I get chided a lot by my colleagues for consistently acting like a county commissioner or a councilman. They view that as a negative, and I view that as a positive. I chaired the French Broad MPO. I was incoming chair of the Land of Sky at the time I was elected. My background is very solidly in local government, and the water and sewer issues particularly has been something I've been working on for 30 years. I'm a former national president of the Sierra Club, former executive director of a local environmental organization, and it's that set of issues, land use, transportation, air and water, that really brought me to the public sector. Aside from talking about the study committee, I want to talk broadly on water and sewer, and I'm open to questions on any subject, anything here or anything else. The study committee started out as part of House Bill 718, and it relates to rates and transfers. Essentially, the original bill would have prohibited counties and cities from establishing differential rates for public enterprises without the approval of the local government commission. It also would have required a public enterprise to be accounted for in a separate segregated fund. No different, frankly, than what you currently do, but that's not necessarily common practice across the state. That ultimately morphed into a study committee, and I shared that the charge of the study committee with the mayor and your manager. Hopefully that got circulated. So how did this study committee come about? Well, it grew out of legislation dealing with the water system in Asheville. Without getting into the weeds, when that legislation was found to be unconstitutional, as I assume you know, I started a process to try to resolve some long-standing issues between Henderson County and the city of Asheville by bringing the parties to the table to talk. I hope to avoid the need for legislation. I guess I've been quoted that there are more than one way to skin a cat. The other way to skin this cat would be to have the local governments themselves get these issues resolved and not involve the legislature. One of the issues that's out there is a representation issue for my district, which involves Henderson County. Henderson County has no representation on MSD, even though its sewage is treated by MSD. And 40% of Asheville's water customers, including those in Henderson County, are outside the city limits, and therefore don't have the same sort of representation. Of course, what I found out when I started into this thing is that nearly 70% of Hendersonville's water system customers lie outside the Hendersonville city limits. Basically, private water systems are regulated by the Public Utility Commission. Municipal water systems or county water systems are assumed to be the responsibility of the mayor and council or the county commission. And the idea is that all those ratepayers are, or at least most of them, are constituents. And therefore, if they have a problem with their water or their sewer, what do? They get rid of the city council or the mayor or whatever. The problem is, let's say, pick on Hendersonville, 70% of those people don't effectively have any way to have anything reviewed. And I'll talk in just a second, when you listen to what the statewide issue is, you then understand, I hope, where I'm coming from. As I also hope you know, I am presently pursuing an interlocal agreement between Henderson County and Asheville. I convened that meeting early, I guess last summer, and my understanding, at least, is that the lawyers for Asheville and Henderson County have agreed as to the form of the agreement on water. And I urged the Henderson County Commission, when I met with them last week, to move expeditiously. My belief is that if Henderson County and Asheville can sign in a local agreement, that largely deals with the water issue. The one issue that's still out there is to try to figure out the representation piece. The study committee, while it started out focused on Asheville and Western North Carolina, now is really about a much broader issue. And let me explain the issue. There are probably, according to the Treasurer's Office, 30 to 60 municipalities, local governments, some of them are counties actually, that are functionally bankrupt. And the reason they're bankrupt is because they, for probably the most normal situation, they were a mill town. And the mill town had a water system and a sewer system, and ultimately the town took over the water system and the sewer system, and then the mill closed. And so they were caught with their water or sewer systems, and now they don't have enough customers, and they're not long-term sustainable. The Treasurer's Office and the DEQ, when this study committee first got put forward, came to me and said, there's a need for more regional approaches. It's just not sustainable. Every city doesn't need its own water and sewer system. There's just not enough customers there. They've got to be combined in some fashion. And the General Assembly needs to create incentives to do that. And so that's sort of what brought it on. On the one hand, the Treasurer is saying these things financially are not sustainable. And on the other hand, DEQ is saying they're never going to be maintained. We keep coming back and throwing $100,000 or $300,000 at them, and it's a Band-Aid. And that sewer system is going to fail 3 or 5 years from now. We're going to be right back there putting another Band-Aid on it. And so the two departments have basically come forward and said to the General Assembly, specifically me, can you help us fix this? We got a study committee. I expect to have a few meetings this spring and then work late into next year. We've had our first meeting. It was simply educational. Our next meeting, sometime next month, will be educational again. I don't anticipate putting forward any legislation in the short session related to this. We brought in the Institute of Government. The League of Municipalities actually will be on the agenda the next time, and we're consulting with them. The League is deeply concerned, as you might imagine. On the one hand, they represent the cities and towns, but they recognize that there's a problem. And so we've got to figure out some carrots and some sticks, perhaps, to move to a different place. So that's where we are on that. I want to touch on MSD. I'm going to put together a letter to Henderson County and Buncombe County Commissions and the City of Asheville before the upcoming short session, which is in mid-May. I think it is very unfortunate what happened with Henderson County's application to join MSD. I didn't anticipate that Asheville's and Buncombe County's representatives on the MSD board would vote as a block against Henderson County joining MSD. And I want to give you the reason why that. Henderson County's sewer system joining MSD was part of the original water bill. No one had a problem with that piece of the water bill. There were lots of problems with the water bill, but there's no problem with the sewer piece. And the reason for that is the sewer already connects through MSD. MSD's line, connector line, comes through the northern part of Henderson County. Way back when, Henderson County presumably used its condemnation powers to put in the MSD line. And so no one pushed back on that. But when the Asheville water decision came down, and then I came back to the mayor, and I came back to Chairman Newman and others, what became real clear is that if we had applied, Henderson County had applied at that point, we would have actually taken one of Asheville's seats. And Mayor Mannheimer and Chairman Newman both told me that was not acceptable, and we had to fix that. And so I thought I fixed it. Basically, this is MSD is formed under again a law of general application, and so I can't just do a local bill and insert Henderson County into the thing. I've got to create something, and what we did is I just made Henderson County and counties have the same amount. I could have moved it the other way and put Henderson County down for 2 seats, but then that would have meant Asheville would have lost a seat. And so that's what I was trying to do, and so I was very surprised with what happened. I don't know where we will go with respect to the MSD piece, but what I really ask is that you help me solve this problem. I've been trying during my 7 years as a legislator to sort of check off a range of issues that have thwarted local governments from working on issues that don't know our boundaries, transportation, clean water, and a range of other things. this is one of those issues. My constituents are paying a higher rate and are totally unrepresented on the MSD board. I tried to do this in an open fashion, and I now need your help because, again, I don't want to go back and just impose something. What I'd like to have happen here is I'd like to have Buncombe County, Henderson County, and Nashville, they're the big players, and see if they can help me work through this. I'll get back to legislative staff and we'll see if there are another way to go here, but this is something that is a huge impediment in terms of bringing these governments together. So I only have really two pitches. My first is that you will take up the water agreement and hopefully largely deal with water issues as between Henderson County and the city of Asheville. And then secondly, help me work on the MSD issue. And I will give you, send you a letter which sort of sets forth as the history as I understand it. I'm doing some research on that now so that we're all working from the same point. And I would love to have your help in getting to a better place with that. And at this point, I'm willing to take questions on the study committee, water and sewer issues, anything legislative. Although I don't know a darn thing about Asheville redistricting, so, but you can ask, I just, not my bill. But I'll stop right there, and I really appreciate your willingness to hear from me. I'd love to take whatever questions you might have.
Representative McGrady, we appreciate you coming here today, and just for the council, the interlocal agreement that Representative McGrady is talking about as between Asheville and Henderson County has been drafted and wordsmithed between the city attorney and the Henderson County attorney. What it addresses is the potential need for water line extensions in northern Henderson County related to economic development opportunities. And it sort of sets out the understanding that we can have between the two bodies if the need arises for water line extensions in northern Henderson County. It does give us the ability to have the final say, if you will, because we have to consider the cost of each of the projects, but it gives us the parameters for how to consider them and what to do there. That interlocal agreement has yet to be heard by this council, but what we would do is time it so that Henderson County is considering it right around the same time we are as well. We have done this once before when we sold the Brevard Road property, the Ferry Road property. Both bodies adopted an agreement right around the same time. So,
and that, if I may, that's quite fair. Just to give some context here, this is in the nature actually of an amended agreement because there is already agreement in place as between Henderson County and Asheville, and there wasn't everybody on the same page in the beginning understanding that, but we've got it, and there were some ambiguities that were recognized back when I was a county commissioner, and I was working with Brownie and Holly and a range of the folks, and we just never quite got it done. And so I think this would if it's done right, will hopefully avoid issues in the future.
Do you have anybody have some other? Representative McGrady, we do have some folks here that I know want to talk about this topic during some public comment because they've signed up. Do you have any objection to?
No, my spouse is indisposed, so I can't stay all night, but if you wanted to take them up in advance of your normal public session, then I certainly would stay to hear what's being said.
Representative McGrady, thank you for taking the time. I think it's a great thing for you to be able to come here, us to be able to kind of ask you questions, kind of face to face. You sort of started off talking about some concerns that you had that folks were saying, look, this is really your study commission was really an ulterior motive to seize the water system, right? I work with local governments who are distressed. I do that for a living, not here in North Carolina, but in other parts. So I understand regionalization. I understand municipal concerns. Obviously, Asheville's situation is very different, right? We're not a mill town. And so
And you're not charging differential rates, so
we can't though, right? We got the Sullivan Act, right? We're forbidden from doing that.
before
right?
my time.
Right, before all our time. But you can still change that if you wanted. Still within your power. But so the question I have here is really kind of more of this boogeyman, right? Because the work you're doing in terms of trying to figure out regionalization of mill towns is important, right? And you can look at the economics of that. But why not just say with the study commission and take the air out of the balloon of those folks to say, look, this study commission isn't going to be looking at dealing with Asheville's water system, right? To the extent you're going to do a bill or a carrot or a stick, well, why not just sort of just say, look, we're not going to deal with it, and take the air out of the balloon for those who you know, in your perspective, maybe you may feel are unfairly criticizing you.
This is why I'm here, is to try to do that. The only issue that in any way would relate to Asheville would be trying to solve this representation fix. That could relate to Asheville, so I can't, with a straight face, say whatever comes out of this will not at all relate to Asheville. I will tell you, you know, the bigger issues down in Henderson County, and there's bigger issues at other places across the state. So Asheville is in no way a target here. You're not talking about something that's aimed at Asheville. If I can take care of MSD and this other water agreement, frankly, I've taken care of my constituents.
And when you said other water agreement, you're referring to the interlocal
one we
agreement?
just talked about.
The new
Yeah.
MOU.
I think my guess is that if we take care of those two things, Representative McGRADY and Henderson County have no other issues to talk about. Henderson County's issues are, with respect to the representation issue, actually relate to Hendersonville, where 70% is a much bigger number than 40%. And since will have an agreement with Asheville, there's no interest within the local governments within Henderson County that I'm aware of to wade deeply into representation issues with respect to Asheville.
To echo BJ, I mean, I have Representative McGrady and I had an opportunity to speak again, and we do speak from time to time before today's meeting, and we have this outstanding issue with the interlocal agreement between Asheville and Henderson County, which I view as a positive thing, and the outstanding issue of the MSD voting to take in the King Creek system in northern Henderson County. And Gwen and I both serve on the MSD, and I've been there for quite a while and are aware of those issues. And I was saying to Representative McGrady that it is hard to strike a deal, as it were, where there is this looming sort of unknown threat. And I understand what Representative McGrady is trying to get at, because he's been talking about it for quite some time, and this is this issue of representation for customers that are outside the system, so they can't vote for the elected officials that make decisions about that system. And that is how it's set out statutorily in North Carolina. That's just the fact of the matter. And with the growth of cities in North Carolina, there's probably going to be more of this rather than less. You see this atrophy in rural areas, but you see this growth in urban areas, and you're going to see more customers outside the system.
Well, particularly with the inability of cities to involuntarily annex.
Right. So whatever it is that this study commission will ultimately do with regard to the representation issue will have to be a statewide bill. Asheville would be swept up in whatever that is. And I wish we had some agreement about that, some way to resolve that before we could go ahead with these other issues and make a decision about that. We have been acting under a looming threat since I've been in office, since 2009, of one or another. I would say we're at a calmer time period than we have been before, so that is good. But it was quite a fight to hold on to our water system and to spend time down at the legislature talking to representatives about the decisions they were going to make. And Brian Turner's in the audience here, and I would argue one of the reasons he ended up getting elected was because of that fight. So I'm hopeful we can find some resolution around all of this, because I think some of these things are ultimately probably good, but I would look for us to find a place where we're not fighting about this anymore, would be my hope.
I share that. And we got one easy thing. Let's see if we can get an agreement in place on water. And then we've got something that's harder now than I thought it was, and that's the MSD thing. And we just have to take them in order. The study committee will complete its work before the long session next year. And if we go through a process, we may not put forward any legislation. The Hendersonville situation, as I told the mayor, actually they could resolve it and do away with this whole issue, because there's all water and sewer is all connected up. And they could potentially take that off the table. We still got the problem in mostly areas in the eastern part of the state where you've got towns are extending their water system to buttress their city and taking in more and more non-city residents, and those folks, don't have a voice. And the city is being driven by the finances, and the folks out in the rural areas may be more interested in the water quality. Anyway, you've summed it up well. Thank you.
Can I just try to put a little bit finer point on it? So I think I hear everything you're saying, and I think those two issues make sense to keep working out. So I just want to sort of repeat what I'm hearing. It seems to me that what I'm hearing you say is that we are past the time when anyone is looking to force a merger or take over or otherwise seize or remove from the control of the city of Asheville its water system. Is that?
I can't speak for anyone, but I can say Chuck McGRADY pretty well, and no, I have absolutely no interest in going down that road.
Great.
Unless I'm forced. And I don't think I'm going to be forced, because I'm trying to disconnect these issues from each other. No, I do not expect I will have any legislation having to deal with Asheville's water system.
Great. Thank you.
Sorry, that's a question. So, Roger, you just said unless you're forced. Under what circumstances might you envision yourself being forced?
If we don't take care of the MSD issue, then I'm going to have to try to figure out how to push it, because my constituents are paying too much for their sewer, and they are unrepresented. And if the Buncombe County and its various cities can't help me figure out how to get around that, then the question becomes, what do I do about it? And it may not have anything to do with water. There's a lot of mistrust here. I get that. I don't know how you don't gain trust by taking small steps moving forward, and that's what I'm trying to do here. Let's check these things off one at a time and move forward and get to a point. Could I see myself even backing away from the 40% Asheville representation issue? Yeah, I could. Let's get the MSD piece done. Let Hendersonville and Henderson County deal with their 70% issue. And again, I recognize, Mayor Mannheimer and I talked about this. Part of the problem here is caused by the General Assembly. You used to be able to involuntarily annex. You can't now. That 40% number is going to go up, likely, as you add water customers likely outside your area. I've indicated, again, I can only speak for myself, a willingness to try to work on that issue. Now, that's a heavy lift. But you've also got other sets of economic issues that I suspect a chair of the Appropriations Committee could be helpful on. But I can't be helpful when I try to solve a problem and I get burned. And that's what happened on MSD from my perspective. And I can't be helpful if we don't deal with some of these issues, even if they're incremental. I'd like to be at a better place. You represent the golden goose. I don't want to slay the golden goose. The economic development in Western North Carolina depends upon the health of this city. I recognize that. I've said it publicly for decades. I have no interest, despite where I live, of doing damage to the city of Asheville, but I need the city of Asheville to work with its neighbors, and that's why I'm here. I'm not sending out a press release. I'm actually going around to all the various governments, the main ones, and trying to have a conversation. So thank you again. I'm sorry. I'll go too long.
Okay, we've got a few people that
Thank you.
wanted to, thank you. Let's see. First is Barry Summers. Maggie will implement the 3-minute time period for public comment. I've got some people signed up, but if you're not signed up and you decided you want to talk about this, you can have that opportunity.
Do I still have the ability to speak for longer if I've got people who are giving up their time?
It's very unusual for us to do public comment
I
during
understand.
presentations anyway. Why don't we just,
And I don't need to speak for 10 minutes. If I need to go just a minute or two over, I hope you'll give me a little leeway. My name is Barry Summers. I say I'm from Asheville, but I'm actually a resident of Woodfin. I had a bunch to say here, but I think you just saw what is undeniable, which is Representative McGRADY is saying that it's still very possible that he's going to come after Asheville's water. Saying that he doesn't want to do it unless he's forced, meaning unless he gets everything that he and Henderson County want. That's as clear as saying, yes, I'm absolutely thinking about it, which is what he did say the day that he introduced the bill that created this study committee. He was reported in 3 different newspapers. Yeah, I'm still considering the nuclear option, which is forcing regionalization of the entire 2-county river water and sewer systems. I do want to go to somewhat of the history, and something which hasn't been talked about is that my belief that's what's been driving this from the beginning is the fact that the city of Hendersonville and Henderson County can't get along and have been fighting about these issues for decades. If you can, go to the website saveourwaterwnc.com. I've got documentation of everything that I'm saying. There's a link to a 1994 Henderson County minutes of a meeting that was a region-wide Let's Study Water and Sewer Regional Authority. And it was put forward by the city of Asheville, Henderson County, MSD, Buncombe County, and several other large regional players all agreed unanimously, yes, let's study at getting a water and sewer authority for the entire region. The one entity that said, no, we're not ready for that, was the city of Hendersonville. They have a real problem with Henderson County. Their 2 offices are 4 blocks apart. They've been fighting about this for decades. And if you read the minutes of that meeting, you'll see that some of the same people who are involved now were involved then, including the current mayor of Hendersonville and the current chairman of the Henderson County Commission. They have been fighting about this literally for decades. And the attractive solution is to blame Asheville and Buncombe County for Henderson County's inability to build and maintain and operate and have control of their own water and sewer infrastructure. And I think that's what's been driving this for the last 20 years. It's especially been driving it for the last 7 years. And if you think I'm exaggerating, 1 week ago, Henderson County Commission stated that they were having such a problem with the city of Hendersonville and getting sewer service to a public elementary school that they've asked Representative McGRADY, or at least one commission member has, and I think he speaks for where they're going, ask Representative McGRADY to go back to Raleigh and change the rules, which is what he's signaled is a trigger for what he will go back to Raleigh and do. Is if Henderson County asks for regionalization, he's going to go back and do it. So, last thing, I'm not opposed to regionalization. I think it's a good thing. I think we should study it. I think every time someone tries to use force, you set it back for another decade. So I urge Representative McGrady to consider standing down and looking at actual cooperation and not force. Thank you.
I have Sam Special. It looks like special, but
It's my handwriting. Madam Mayor and council people, Sam Special is the name from Southwest Asheville. Let me read a few remarks I have. Mr. McGrady comes to us today at the end of his information tour, under the premise that the recent resounding rejection by the MSD board of his plans for emerging regional utilities was merely their lack of understanding his plan, and not due to the unfair allocation of new board representation and the voting configuration. As many of us are aware, the courts and our citizens soundly rejected that attempt to seize the water system, going so far as defeating 2 of 3 of the local legislators who pushed for the water system seizure, leaving Mr. McGrady left to fight that battle. At the end of that phase 1, he remarked that there are more than one ways to skin a cat, taken to mean that he had other legislative measures up his sleeve without harming local cats. That was a joke. But he is not without weapons. Voila, he became co-chair of the House Committee to study rates and transfer public enterprise, a long name for something that might give it free rein for all sorts of actions, especially that GOP favorite, privatization. The MSD board got it right. They are experienced and sophisticated local politicians, as we know here, who readily saw through that long-named committee that gave it considerable leeway to do some good, but also some considerable mischief, like we've seen repeatedly by the majority GOP legislatures. This is the same legislature that imposed county districts, city districts, and big-time gerrymandering. Students of democracy might recall the warning to Tocqueville. I have his classic Democracy in America, and one of the things he pointed out was tyranny of the majority. I'd be glad to lend my copy, unabridged, to anyone who's interested in this document. In spite of Mr. McGrady's desire to use his committee to stir things up and poke at Asheville, I leave you with that old expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Thank you for your time.
thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up to speak on this topic. Is there anyone else? Yes.
Yes, my name is Beth Jessic. Sorry, breaking the furniture. My name is Beth Jessic. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I apologize. I'm going to do, there's a little repetition here. There's a reason for that. We've been fighting this for 7 years, and we've heard a lot of repetition coming out of the legislature as well. We hear this again and again and again. In late 2013, then Representative Tim Moffitt and Representative Chuck McGrady wrote a law to take control of Asheville's water. The law eventually passed the House and Senate, as we know. After several lawsuits, in late 2016, the North Carolina Supreme Court ruled in favor of Asheville, saying that the taking of Asheville's water was unconstitutional. I'd like to quote from a December 21st, 2016 Citizen Times article announcing that the judge's decision. A member of the GOP Majority General Assembly, Representative Chuck McGrady, meanwhile, said the court decision may not be the final word, and there may be other ways to loosen the city's control. And here we go again. As I've said in the past, there's more than one way to skin a cat. We've also heard just recently, we have the nuclear option. That's yet another way. We heard Representative McGrady say just a few minutes ago, if I'm forced to, we will use the legislature to take the water if you don't give me what I want. I didn't know that was the way democracy worked. Representative McGrady is relentless in his efforts to take control of Asheville's water. For the past 7 years, he has been using his legislative authority in the North Carolina House to take our water. When he says he's trying to work with Asheville to resolve water issues, please realize there are no issues to be resolved. The courts resolved the Asheville water issues over a year ago. Representative McGrady's efforts appear to be conciliatory and cooperative. His actions in the legislature, though, are antagonistic and punitive, making it difficult to believe he has altruistic motives and is acting with integrity. Please consider this should the city enter into discussions with him. I appreciate your time this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to comment on this topic? Okay, with that, thank you, Representative McGrady, for being here. And we're going to move on to the next presentation, which is going to be given to us by Kathy Ball. This is an update on the Charlotte Street Innovation District process.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, and members of City Council, this is a brief presentation just to provide you with the context and the process that the city is at this point, and to get to give you an update on where we are with the North Charlotte Street process. Some of this information you will already know it, but I wanted to point out there is a long history of the city working on the North Charlotte Street corridor, and that is the corridor from 240 up north to Edwin. And you can see on the screen that there have been several studies that have been completed with regard to this corridor. I want to point out to everyone also that there is a project page that has all of this information on and is available for anyone to view. There is also, this corridor was established as a municipal service district in 2014. The map just demonstrates for you the outline of the area that's covered within that municipal service district and the language that affected that area and caused that area to be designated. Within the city's current budget, there is $1,250,000 to make improvements to that corridor, particularly with an eye toward making improvements toward bike and pedestrian improvements. There has been some recent engagement there has been ongoing engagement throughout all of the studies that have been completed, but most recently the staff has been engaging with the Business Association to deal with some more immediate safety issues. And so I wanted to just kind of make you all aware of what those issues are. There is information regarding the crash data. Flashing speed limits have been installed. You all as council have reduced the speed limit on this street. New counts have been taken. And then we are scheduled to add new crosswalks to be installed on Charlotte Street at Baird and Broad by the end of April. The staff memos that you see at the bottom of this are also available for viewing on the city's website. So the next steps, we are bringing this to you because there's been we've received a lot of questions, and we understand that you all have as well. We wanted to come forward just to make sure that everybody knew there was going to be an opportunity for public comment and public input, not only regarding the project, but regarding the process as well. So the crosswalk will be completed in April. This item is on PED agenda for March. At that meeting, there will be consideration before the PED committee of different planning options. And for example, there may be an option of doing some land use planning around that corridor, or it may be just looking at the corridor from a transportation standpoint. So that will be before the PED committee, and we will move whatever recommendation comes out of PED, we will move that forward in April to the full council, and then we will develop schedules for the project based on that outcome. And that is all I have for you on the presentation.
Kathy, last night there was a meeting about stormwater remediation in this area also, and there was a concern expressed by the neighborhood group that stormwater mitigation and this Charlotte Street project, first of all, a little confusion that the stormwater remediation was going to use the $1,250,000. So there was a little confusion about that. And then also an idea, what the neighborhood was asking for is that the stormwater remediation and the North Charlotte Street project kind of be worked together so that you didn't make one improvement or change and then turn around 3 years later and make a different improvement. So just publicly, staff said last night that they were coordinating, but I would just like that affirmed by you. And that the stormwater remediation wouldn't come from this $1,250,000.
That is correct. So the project that you're referring to is the Edwin and Celia flooding issues that are around that project. So there was a plan that's been developed to help with the flooding in that area. I think we are trying to evaluate whether or not those projects really overlap, and we're trying to also evaluate, there are some serious flooding issues because of that, out of that project that will be resolved. The timing on this project is probably 3 to 4 years out, so we're trying to evaluate whether or not some of those flooding issues really that we should address them sooner. So yes, staff is folding in the Edwin and Celia stormwater project, and you are correct, Vice Mayor, in that there's a separate pot of money set aside from stormwater funds, from the enterprise funds, to address those flooding issues, and this money is not considered a part of that.
Thank you.
When we come forward at PED, we will have the answers and be able to fold in the impact of potentially bringing those two projects together and provide pros and cons associated with that.
Kathy, with the crosswalk, are we going to put in a light or just try to establish a crosswalk at that intersection?
At this point, and Ken may be a better person to speak to this, at this point, we're just putting in the crosswalk. But Ken, if you don't mind coming up and just saying a little bit more about that from a technical standpoint.
I'm Ken Putnam, the Transportation Department Director. Yes, at this time, we were trying to follow through with what was agreed with the Charlotte Street Business Association back in October, so it is just a crosswalk. But we're moving forward to try to go ahead and get current traffic counts there, the 12-hour counts that we would need to, even if we designed a traffic signal, we need those counts for that design, so we're moving forward with that process. And what I have confidence in, that we would be able to justify or warrant the signal based on the pedestrian activity there, and then we could move forward with the design. But we would also have to identify the funding source when we get to that point in time as well.
Well, even short of a signal are the, I think we're using these in some parts of the city, the pedestrian activated blinking lights, flashers that tell cars there is in fact somebody here and you need to stop.
Okay, there's two different types of signs we're using. We're using the normal pedestrian warning signs, the diamond-shaped ones that have the LEDs around them. Mm-hmm. Those that we're using so far flash all the time.
Right.
And we're prepared to definitely include those at this crosswalk. There's another type of flashing light that we use down at Amboy Road, and I believe that one is activated by a push button. Mm-hmm. But at the moment, the federal government has taken our ability away to install new ones because there's an issue over a patent, but I think that that's being worked out and that'll be changed. So that's why I'm leaving that one on the back burner for the moment.
So we'll at least start with the ones that always flash.
Yes.
And then
and the
if the
difficult...
super important issue gets resolved, then we can increase pedestrian safety even more.
Yes, exactly right. And the challenge is going to be for us, especially on the northbound approach with the sidewalk and the wall, exactly where we can put that sign so it won't be in the way of either a travel lane or a pedestrian.
Is it a patent about those little yellow flags that you carry when you cross?
Yeah,
those
that's a really valuable pattern. Those really rock.
I use them all the time when I cross Merriman by Beaver Lake, and I also shout and jump up and down in addition to that. Okay. Thanks, Kim. Okay, so that concludes our presentations and reports for this evening. As I mentioned, the other reports are online for your information if you would care to see any of it. We have no public hearings tonight. We have no unfinished business scheduled for this evening. We have one item of new business, and this is a resolution on gun violence prevention. This council, I asked for this to be on our agenda. I normally would run a resolution through our governance committee, but we did not have a lot of time ahead of this. So I took the liberty of wording this resolution in a way that I thought we might have a majority or unanimous support for. So it's sort of unusual to do that. There are a lot of folks here that want to talk about this topic, and that's really exciting. A lot of you signed up for the public comment at the very end of council, but if you're here to talk about the gun resolution or anything gun-related, gun violence-related, we're going to have you make your public comment during this time. So because this resolution is not sitting at our desk, I'm going to go ahead and read this. Also, I think it's important to read. Whereas more than 150,000 students attending more than 170 primary and secondary schools have experienced a shooting on campus since the Columbine High School massacre in 1999, and whereas from Columbine to Virginia Tech to Sandy Hook to Parkland, the lives of hundreds of students and school employees have been lost to the plague of gun violence. And whereas on average nearly 24 children are shot each day in the United States, and whereas the City of Asheville is committed to the health and safety of students, school employees, and all residents, and whereas it is the City of Asheville's highest priority to create and maintain a respectful and healthy environment, and the city is therefore committed to reducing gun violence and fatalities. Doing so is necessary to helping all children thrive and remain safe at home, in school, and throughout life. Now therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Asheville that the City of Asheville calls upon the United States Congress and state legislatures to prioritize the protection of students and school system employees and all city residents by all means necessary, including, but not limited to, enacting legislation in furtherance thereof, beginning with a ban on the manufacturing, transferring, and possession of assault weapons. Read, approved, and adopted this, the 27th day of February 2018. I'm a mayor that's a part of the Mayor's Coalition Against Illegal Guns. That is a group that is focused on being opposed to illegal guns, because there's not an organization that is opposed to legal guns. And I assume that is because of the political tension around this issue. But I personally am pretty tired about the political tension around this issue, and would hope that the Congress would act immediately to institute the ban on assault weapons. For me personally, that is not a difficult decision. And if it were me personally, I would go further than that. But given the conversation that's happening in this country right now, that we can't even seem to get to this point, I felt like it would be a good thing for the Asheville City Council to make their opinion known on this issue. So do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
Motion to approve the resolution for gun violence prevention.
In a second. Okay, we have a motion and a second, and I'm going to ask that folks that are here to talk about this issue take this opportunity to speak about it. I'm going to call on the folks that filled out the form first, and then anybody else who wants to talk about it. But we have a lot of people that signed up to speak tonight. So I'm going to begin with Charlene Thibodeau.
My name is Charlene Thibodeau. Basically, I don't think this will help nearly as much as what we can do locally. The violent among us will find a way to hurt us, even if we take away all guns. We already know weapons can be made from common everyday things like fertilizer, trucks, and airplanes. The best solution to school violence lies in a multidisciplinary approach. We should have metal detectors in every school. If our city is too poor to find the money for such an important thing, parent and civic groups would surely chip in to help. School safety should surely be a local thing discussed by our local school boards and supported by the community. Our children are certainly worth it. Every school should have a threat assessment and a highly trained security officer. supported by a group of concerned people to monitor social media. It should be an officer that all the children know and love. Then the children can be honest when they need to tell on a fellow student. Our children need to know that it is all right for concerned adults to violate their privacy on social media for their protection. After 9/11, it took weeks to start making improvements in airport security. Safe schools should be a priority as well. Our schools also need more counselors. Perhaps volunteers can be trained to help. Laws that are already in place could have stopped the shooting in Parkland, but too many dropped the ball. An honest examination, without blame, needs to be done on reporting and follow-up procedures, there and here, so that improvements can be made. Let's make it easier to say something effectively, not just make more regulations about this kind of thing. Of course, this kind of approach will take more work than just making new laws. Let us stop looking for just one answer to complex problems and calling people who don't like our one answer bad names. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie Cummings.
Thank you all for having me. For people about my age, 18, the topic of gun control and mass shootings is literally life and death, which is why I wanted to be a part of this discussion and resolution today. For starters, I wanted to thank you all for doing something, because certainly any action means the world right now. However, I will say the solutions of banning the manufacturing, transferring, and possession of assault weapons seem somewhat absolute and unrealistic. What I encourage is that we seek compromise, which might sound difficult in the modern political climate, but is absolutely necessary. In October of 2017, the nation was split 48 to 49% on this issue for or against a law similar to the proposition in this resolution. Clearly, Congress will not pass a ban with a nation split nearly 50-50, particularly if there is a conservative majority, many of whom receive benefits from lobbyists like the NRA. But this is not a place to abandon efforts. In fact, refusal to converse in order to solve the problem only exacerbates the issue. So, what is the next step on such a polarizing issue? Guns are tangible objects and undoubtedly a part of the problem, meaning there are a multitude of concrete solutions. But I believe we must start small and through the culmination of little victories, make an enormous change. First, let us raise the legal age of any gun sale, not only handguns and high-caliber rifles, including at gun shows and secondhand sales, from 18 years of age to 21. Next, mandate a 10-day waiting period for the purchase of any firearm in the U.S. In a poll done by Quinnipiac University, an overwhelming 83% of Americans support a waiting period. This is a very feasible option that could prevent a shooter acting upon an impulsive whim. Another solution already in place in California and Connecticut, but could be in every state across the nation, allows for a temporary restraining order to be enacted that can prevent the subject of a petition from purchasing or holding firearms. Once these small steps have been taken, we can move forward to the more involved, time-consuming, and resource-requiring steps, such as in-depth background checks, including school disciplinary records and mental health examinations, and finally tackle the nationwide ban on assault weapons. In closing, I have 2 requests for you all as our representatives. 1, take action as you all are the ones with actual legislative power. Be willing to take it in small steps and compromise if you must, but do not hesitate. Enough is enough right now. Enough was enough long before Columbine, Virginia Tech, Sandy Hook, and of course, Parkland. Do not take heed until Congress is forced to address these issues for my sake and the sake of my peers, who could be the next victims. And 2, please support...
Okay, you can hand your comments to the city clerk and she'll pass them around to us. The next person I have signed up to speak about this is Caroline Bowers. Yep. So watch the lights on the lectern. That'll give you 3 minutes to speak, and when it buzzes, then you're done.
Hello, and thank you all for having me here today. My name is Caroline Bowers, and I'm a senior at T.C. Robertson High School. I'd like to address you all on a topic that has taken our nation by storm in the past couple of weeks: gun violence and school shootings. I request that the council and everyone here today, whether Democrat or Republican, independent or libertarian, Green or Socialist Party, come together and ask themselves, when is it enough? When is it enough that we will finally admit that this is a serious problem? When is it enough that we will begin to recognize the early signs of mental illness and seek help for those who need it? When is it enough that our congressmen will draft new legislation in addition to their routine statements of thoughts and prayers? And please hear me when I say, while sending condolences to the victims and survivors is appropriate and appreciated, further action needs to be taken. Enough is enough, change is long overdue. I'm proud to be a member of a generation where, in the wake of a school shooting that rocked their community, my peers are planning marches on Washington, rallying on the streets, and addressing their state legislators. To those who say that this movement is just another flare-up and rallying cry from the youth that will die down in a few months with no true legislative change, I would argue that this instance is different. It has to be different. Tangible change is in fact feasible, and it is just on the horizon. It's time that we show families and friends impacted by mass shootings our dedication to their loved ones' memories by proposing long-term solutions so no one ever has to face the same tragedy again. It's time to reach across the aisle, make compromises, and institute real change. Let's turn our attention to the epidemic of gun violence by coming together and tackling the root of the problem: irresponsible gun ownership. As I address you all today, I would like to suggest some proposed solutions to the all-too-common occurrence of school shootings. First, one of the easiest actions we can take is to push for the inclusion of a person's school reports and psychiatric history as an additional component of background checks. Extensive school reports and outside references on Nicholas Cruz's, the shooter's history, might have prevented the tragic shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Additionally, if laws preventing Cruz from purchasing an assault rifle because of his severe mental instability had already existed, and if the minimum age required to purchase an assault rifle was already 21, and if a 10-day waiting period and more comprehensive background checks were already in place, we might not be having this debate. I'm not asking for anything extreme, just roadblocks. It's time that we begin introducing small solutions to the problem. And we can certainly do this without the yelling and the all-or-nothing rhetoric that has filled both parties for too long. We don't deserve to go on like this, cowering in our classrooms and afraid to enter the doors of our elementary, middle, and high schools. The children of America don't deserve to experience yet another school shooting. We will continue to push for tangible change in our own communities in hopes that we can finally bid farewell to the rolling headlines of gun violence in our education systems. Thank you.
Excellent timing. And Sean McDowell.
Hi, I'm Sean McDowell, and I'm a senior at T.C. Robertson High School. Due to the fact that I am only 18 years old, I do not know what it is like to live in a country without mass school shootings. Ever since the Columbine High Massacre on April 20th, 1999, America has been plagued year after year with unceasing gun violence that is yet to come to an end. My peers and I arrive at school every day understanding full well what is transgressed previous to our attendance. Each and every one of us has experienced the feeling of heightened tension in a quiet classroom when the door opens itself to us behind our backs. Enough is enough. The sad reality is that during the first 7 weeks of 2018, there have been 8 instances of deaths in school shootings, deaths that were unwarranted and preventable. More sensible gun legislation, with the aim of protecting the students and citizens of the United States, is absolutely necessary for the future of our educational success and our country. I believe that tighter background checks, increased security at schools, and a ban on all weapons of war, including semi-automatic rifles, is the right step forward for a safer, friendlier America. These vehicles of death and destruction are both too common in the hands of our citizens and much too easy to obtain. From what I've witnessed throughout my short lifetime, it is apparent that weapons like those are only catalysts for anguish and suffering. And furthermore, giving teachers weapons of war, fighting fire with fire, is not the answer. The brave students of Parkland, Florida, who could have been any of our classmates, did not need to die, but they need not die in vain either. The time for action is now, so please, let us all work together to ensure the safety of our peers, children, and friends through the encouragement of smarter gun legislation aimed at saving lives. And in honor of those lost on February 14th, never again. Thank you.
I don't have anyone else signed up to speak on this topic, but if you would like to make a comment on this topic, now's the appropriate time. Is there anyone wishing to comment? Yes.
I don't have any prepared remarks. However, I would just like to say a couple of things. One is, I'm sorry, my name is Will Thibodeau. The first thing I would like to say is I would like to thank these three young people for stepping up and speaking this afternoon. It certainly is good to hear that. Is what I wanted to say is that from my perspective, I think that you, as our community leaders, should take steps right now to protect these children the same way that you guys have protected yourself. We have a building here that is secure. There's these magnetic detectors. There's somebody that's guarding the place. I think that our schools can be protected the same way. It's just that it needs to be done, and you need to do it. You have the resources. You have the financial resources. I would say you just need to get to the school board, ask them what they need to protect the children the same way that you have protected yourself. Thank you.
Thank you. I am participating tomorrow in a meeting with the superintendent and the police chief, and we will be discussing this topic. Of course, is at the school board's decision about safety around schools, not the city council, but we will certainly be talking about that topic and more.
Great.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak on this topic? Yes.
Council and Madam Mayor, I'm actually here to speak on another topic, but I do want to address this.
Please state
My
your
name
name.
is Eva Ritchie. Okay, my name is Eva Ritchie. I worked in gun control for 10 years. I tabled all around Asheville. I wrote articles that were published in the Citizen Times. I was a part of the first Million Mom March in Washington. And after working in it for 10 years, I finally came to the opinion that until the blood in this country ran as a river up to our necks, we were not going to do anything about it. I worked hard because I knew banning assault weapons would work, and it did work. And the Million Mom March was in the spring of 2004 because the law was going to sunset in September. As everyone knows, it failed. But I think this time is different, and I really applaud you for stepping out. And I applaud you, Madam Mayor, because you are absolutely right. Military assault weapons are not for self-defense. They are for mass slaughter. And getting them off the street will at least be one step towards getting us to a safer place. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on this topic? So just to be clear, cities and counties in North Carolina have very limited authority over gun control. And in fact, in 2013, before any of you were on council, I think either you, yeah. The legislature in 2011 passed legislation that required cities to allow concealed carry in city parks. To allow concealed carry in city parks. And we had to change our ordinance to conform to the state law, and we had to change all of the signage in our city parks so that we weren't allowed to include the prohibition on guns in city parks. And at that time, the City Council adopted a resolution in protest to that legislation. But there really wasn't anyone here to comment on it. It didn't seem like it created much of a stir at all in North Carolina. So here we are, we still have this very limited authority, very limited ability, and I hear the call for all kinds of measures and talking about mental health and strengthening security in schools. I have 3 sons in public schools. My husband is a public school teacher. I'm obviously all for that, but I'm personally fairly exasperated about the conversation that doesn't have anything to do with guns and what we're going to do in terms of regulating guns. And we did have a Congress that at one time banned assault-style weapons, and we do now actually have, the polling is indicating that over 60% of Americans are in favor of banning assault-style weapons. But it is because of the NRA and its influence that politicians are not able to make a decision that otherwise represents a majority of the population. So I'm going to stop being super angry about it, and we're going to consider this resolution tonight, because that is what we are able to do for now in exercising our voice in this conversation. But if there is more that we can do or I can do, I will certainly be willing to do it. And I'm closely monitoring the conversation that's happening in our country and in our state around this issue.
Madam Mayor, can I just mention that on March 24th, there is a march here in Asheville called the March for Our Lives, the national, I think that's the national movement. There'll be one here in Asheville starting in, it's from 11 to 1. I would sort of assume it's maybe starting downtown. That seems to be where these things happen. But there is a Facebook page, and I would just, if this is a compelling issue for you, I hope that you will attend that march, and I will see you there.
Okay, anybody else wishing to comment? All right, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. That concludes our regular agenda. I do have a number of people signed up to speak on various topics at this point, so I'm going to just start calling on them. The first is William Polk. And Mr. Polk, it looks like you're wishing to speak for 10 minutes, and you have 3 other people that are willing to waive their time to allow you to speak?
I won't need that much.
Okay.
3
minutes is good. Okay.
Hello, City Council, Mayor, it's nice to see you somewhere besides Asheville Middle's gymatorium. My wife and I, in 1993, started a limousine/for-hire vehicle transportation service. Every year, we apply for and get the Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity for each vehicle, because you have to. We submit the background checks, DMV driving record checks. They inspect the vehicles at Fleet Management. And we also have to show proof of commercial insurance, which is very expensive compared to the other pieces. Why do we need commercial insurance? Because we are commercial transportation. What is commercial transportation? It is probably one of the simplest sentences you can find in regulations. It is someone who provides transportation with a vehicle for a fee. The Asheville Airport requires a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity for all vehicles that pick up passengers at the Asheville Airport. Those rates have really gone up. We're just looking for fairness. Fairness for these application transportation services that are allowed to not follow the City of Asheville laws and regulations. It's almost as if they are unmarked cars. They kind of sneak in and sneak out. And here we are, we're the law, we feel like law-abiding, regulation-following, legitimate transportation services. And we're just feeling a little neglected as to why are we doing this when it costs so much money. My wife and I were getting by. We got 4 kids, but it's a big chunk of change to paying for commercial insurance. And then to see these rates going up. And I even talked to Uber, was one of them, and they said, you can't join us because you have commercial insurance. And I thought, of course you have commercial insurance. We're providing transportation for a fee. And so that's all I have to say.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Because Robin, this has come up before as to the differential treatment. Obviously, there's a discussion in lots of cities because they've got Uber and Lyft and all different kinds of things. Is it a state requirement, or is it what is the differential burden due to?
Differential burden?
You're talking about you have to have commercial insurance.
Commercial insurance.
Yeah.
All they offer is UberX, their version that they only offer here in the Asheville area. They only allow people with personal insurance to operate vehicles. And of course, they're paid a fee.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is what is it that the city could do to address this inequity?
Well, the Uber vehicles, I assume, do not have certificates of personal or public convenience and necessity permits in each of their vehicles. And therefore, they're allowed to, they're charging really low, and we, of course, can't go that low because of the insurance charging, and then the airport permit, and which is now going to go up per trip to the airport.
But, okay, I guess I need to know more about this topic. It sounds fairly complicated.
We have significant restrictions on regulating Uber.
Because they have a statutory carve-out.
They have a statutory protection where we basically can't do it. There are some regulations on other commercial vehicles, and right now I'll have to consult with my Assistant City Attorney, John Maddox, to see exactly what those are and how those are, if we've got any authority to, and if you were inclined to relax those in light of our regulation of Uber, but we'll get that information and report back to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. So I have a couple other people on this topic. The next is, I think it says Harry Siegel.
Hello, everybody. My name is Harry Siegel. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. And thank you for hearing me. I live in Asheville. I own a company called Asheville Airport Shuttle. My concerns are similar. At the airport, we recently have had some new rules about how we are going to pay our fees. There's going to be a reduction in our annual fee, but we are now going to have to use a specific parking lot at the airport, and we're going to have a per exit fee, which is going to total to probably 3 or 4 times the annual amount what we're used to paying. And one of the things that has galvanized us, limousine services, flat rate car services like mine, taxi cabs, is we feel that it's unfair and unequal. We're heavily regulated by the airport, and also there's rules, the city of Asheville Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. I can't get a permit at the airport unless I do this and get that first. So what we're seeing is Uber and Lyft comes through the airport, picks up people, everybody likes their prices, but it's really unfair to us to have to submit to the fees we have to pay, the insurance we have to pay, all these regulations, and they have to do none of it. Their drivers don't have to pay for the commercial insurance that we do. They don't have to get the certificate of convenience and necessity. It seems to me that they're just people driving cars, making money with their cars. Everybody and their brother is doing it. And some of us are going to be put out of business. We are local businesses. We've been here providing great service to the Asheville Regional Airport for years. I've been doing it since 2010, and my business dropped by 20% in 2017. And so My fees are going up, my insurance is going up, and we just want to make the council aware that we're going to do something about it. We intend to take our complaints to the airport. We will get legal representation if we need to, and we're going forward with this. We're going to do something about it, like some of the other cities in other states have done in the United States and around the world. We're just not going to lay down for this. So I guess that's all I have to say. I don't have any real prepared comments, but I've talked enough about this to know what my complaints are and wanted to bring it to the city. So thank you.
I was just wondering that. Yeah. And then also we have isn't Stephanie Brown another city appointee? Yeah, okay. And Mayor, do we have emails for these folks so that when we get information from the city attorney's office, we can share it with them? Okay, great.
And lastly on this topic, Eva Ritchie. Maybe there's somebody else.
Mayor and Council. Government exists for two purposes. One, to regulate competing interests, and two, to improve the public welfare. When citizens feel as though they are not treated fairly, and that government has made regulations that seem to prefer one group over another, and seem to offer success, an easier route to success than another, then people become unhappy because it simply isn't fair. And we have a situation here now which is patently unfair. If you, by the way, I own and run the trolley company out of Hendersonville, North Carolina, and I run a commercial service. Hopefully you've seen some of our trolleys. I always have to tell people, no, we're not gray line. As a commercial provider, in order for me to do business at the airport, I have to have, your certificate of convenience. It is 11 pages, including instructions. Uber doesn't have to have it at all. They don't even have to fill it out. They don't have to pay it. They don't have to have a for hire tag. Their insurance, they do have commercial insurance that is paid for by the umbrella, so they don't have to put out of their pocket a single dime for their commercial insurance. Neither do they have to pay for their airport privilege at the airport. So is this fair? No, it's not fair, and it's not in the public interest because it is seen to be arbitrary and unfair. What am I here asking you to do then about it? I don't believe that you don't have influence in this because as elected officials, you have influence in places we don't. You can pick up a phone to a legislator in Raleigh and say, we got a problem here, and I want to talk about it, and what are we going to do about it? You can talk to the Buncombe Board of Commissioners and say, who was the last two people that we appointed to the airport board that is going to listen to these issues? Are they sympathetic to the small businessman? So I'm asking you, actually, to not require us to get a certificate of convenience anymore. If Uber doesn't have to and they're providing the same for hire services, we shouldn't have to either. And in conclusion, I do want to say this. I have known Chuck McGRADY for 20 years. I have worked with him in Henderson County. For someone to come here and to say that he has made a pretense of altruism and honesty is simply unfounded. If you've been to the DuPont Forest, you can thank Chuck McGRADY in part. If you've enjoyed any of our outdoor greenways, you can thank Chuck McGRADY. So please, as you're thinking about Chuck McGRADY, let's think of who he really is. Thank you.
I don't have anyone else signed up to speak on that issue, unless there's somebody else here who wants to address it. Okay, I've got a couple more people signed up to speak. The first is Casey Campfield.
Council members, Mayor, thank you for letting me speak today. I would like to read some quotes from the person you decided to honor earlier in the meeting. Quote, "We traffic in homosexuality at the peril of our spiritual welfare." Reverend Billy Graham. "Is AIDS a judgment from God? I could not be sure, but I think so." Reverend Billy Graham. "Homosexuality is, quote, a sinister form of perversion." Reverend Billy Graham. "At 93, I never thought we would have to debate the meaning of marriage." Reverend Billy Graham on same-sex marriage. "Only when Christ comes again will the little white children of Alabama walk hand in hand with the little black children." Reverend Billy Graham in response to Dr. Martin Luther King. "They're the ones putting out the pornographic stuff. The stranglehold has got to be broken or the country's going down the drain." Reverend Billy Graham in regards to Jewish people in American media. Now Reverend Graham's evangelical empire has been handed on to his son, Franklin, who is an even more outspoken homophobe and racist. The fact that you would use this platform to honor Billy Graham without even a single mention of his checkered past is beyond cowardly and a great disappointment to many of your constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. I have next Elizabeth Schell.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Schell. I was not planning on speaking tonight. I was planning on silently standing up and holding this flag when you made the proclamation he just referred to. But when I came in and saw that family members were here tonight, I didn't want to add to their grief. Although I'm not sure Reverend Graham would have carried about the grief of others. I appreciate that your statement was less celebratory and more timeline and sympathy. Perhaps politically you felt you had to make some kind of proclamation. But hear me, the decades of hate speech of this man, some of which you just heard, damaged, destroyed really countless lives. We should instead be lifting up all of our loved ones, many and those unnamed that he harmed, with his hate speech, especially his homophobia, racism, and toxic masculinity. All spoken in the name of God, which made it all the worse. When we lift him up, we further tread on those he hurt. Who I really wonder how the experience that they're going through now as he is being just celebrated very much uncritically throughout our nation. And so it was seeing that on the agenda tonight hurt. So I just wanted to say that when we honor hate, we dishonor love. So.
Thank you. The last person I have signed up to speak is Bill Robinson.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I come here tonight to stand up for the homeless, and I'll continue to come back here as often as you'll let me to talk about the priority in protecting the citizens from homelessness in this town. Since 2016, when Janet Jones turned up dead on these streets in Asheville from hypothermia, I don't think we've really learned a lot. I'm just not sure. The statistics I hear are that every single year, 20 homeless people will die on the streets from homeless-related issues. And it's just barbaric. I mean, we're more civilized than this. And I think we really need to take action so that more people don't die. There are new, fresh, and innovative ideas for protecting these people. And I come here tonight with one. Two disabled friends of mine and I decided to do something about the people who are dying on the streets from the cold this winter. And we came across a sleeping bag coat that was manufactured by a nonprofit in Detroit where it gets really cold. And it was started by a 24-year-old woman who was doing this as a kind of a fashion design college project, and has now turned into a 501c3 called the Empowerment Plan that hires women from local shelters in Detroit, trains them to be seamstresses, and has them making the coats to save lives in Detroit. We started a grassroots campaign where we started a GoFundMe page and started putting up flyers. And I have one to show you right now. The design is very interesting. It's designed to be a carry-all and slung over the shoulders, which is another thing that homeless people really need. You know, the shopping cart syndrome is really a problem. And it's made out of ballistic type material that's very sturdy, filled with Thinsulate from 3M that's donated to this woman and her nonprofit. And it's very, you know, unclasps here, the arms unclasp. Unclasps here and turns into a really amazing winter coat, which is with no zippers to break or come off the track. It's all Velcro. And then once you open it, the sleeping bag comes out like that. So the design is amazing, it's very innovative, and it's just an example of the sleeping bag part also comes off so that you can use it as a carry-all bag. So I just wanted to show you this kind of thing, and I think we need more of these types of products, these types of ways of helping the homeless. I have some flyers here too if anybody's interested, and I would love to spend some time talking about the homeless situation in Asheville.
Okay, so first of all, you can hand the flyers to Maggie, and thank you very much for your presentation. I'm wondering if you might be willing to talk to our homelessness advisory committee.
I've attended several meetings, and we've distributed them through ABCCM, AO, Homeward Bound, Haywood Street Congregation, Beloved House. So we're trying to get to all the right places where we can make the most difference.
I remember the last time that you were here, you were directed to try to get in contact, link up with staff. Did that ever happen?
I had already been linked up with Christiana and the HIAC committee, so thank you.
And maybe, Gary, you can follow up. I'm not aware that we actually lost anybody in the cold of this winter. So I am not arguing that homelessness is not a problem in our community, but I don't want everyone to be left with the impression that 20 people died this winter in Asheville. I was in a meeting with folks from Homeward Bound just about a month ago, and I think I specifically said, we did not lose anybody this winter, isn't that correct? And I think the answer was yes, but Gary, maybe we can ask Christiana if she can give us that statistic. And then also the 20, I hadn't heard the 20 people a year, so maybe we can just, as the chair of HCD, I would just be interested to know really what those numbers are about how many people we lose every year. So.
My friends and brothers and sisters on the street would be grateful.
Thank you. That is all I have in terms of people who have signed up to speak. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on any other topic that we haven't already talked about? Okay. If not, we have a closed session motion.
All right, I move that the Asheville City Council go into closed session for the following reasons: to prevent disclosure of information that is privileged and confidential pursuant to the laws of North Carolina, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes. The law that makes the information privileged and confidential is North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318-10A3. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318-11A1. To consult with an attorney employed by the city about matters with respect to which the attorney-client privilege between the city and its attorney must be preserved. The statutory authorization is contained in North Carolina General Statute 143 through 318-11A3.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will adjourn from the closed session.